Redditors whose job requires them to go into other people's houses. What is the weirdest shit you've seen? Went into a woman's house that had a life-size replica slash mannequin of herself mutilated and murdered. Turns out she's a semi-pro actress. She's been an extra in a dozen or so motion pictures, one of which was a B-level hack film. The special effects crew made a latex replica of her for a couple scenes in the movie and let her keep it afterwards. It was very real looking. From a foot away, you'd think it was a real mutilated corpse. Creepy, but I can't blame her for wanting to keep it. Hell of an icebreaker. Unbelievably, this one is a breath of fresh air compared to the other posts. That would be very cool to keep. Approximate 70y/a woman fell in her trailer and injured her hip/femur, but was able to drag herself to the couch and climb onto it. Unfortunately, due to her injury, she was unable to walk. Plus the trailer was a disgusting hoarder situation with clutter everywhere, so navigation was already difficult. She sat on the couch in the same spot for approximate 10 days until a neighbor called 911. When we arrived, she was naked and covered in 10 days worth of feces and urine, and was physically stuck to the couch. The worst parts were that the rats that also lived in her trailer had eaten 2 toes on the left foot down to the bone and approximate half of her right foot. She had such bad neuropathy that she said she could feel the pressure of them chewing but no significant pain and was unable to kick them off. On top of that, she had several sores on her inner upper thighs, along with a skin tear on her right forearm that had live maggots in them. We had to peel her off of the couch, which caused a large portion of skin to slough off as it was dead/decaying after soaking in urine for a prolonged period of time. I've never smelled anything worse than when we broke that seal. The crazy part is that she had a phone near, but didn't want to call 911 because she didn't want to spend all day in the hospital. The neighbor that called had been coming over and giving her food and water, but didn't call us for 10 days since she said she didn't want us to, and it didn't seem that bad at the time. I still have a hard time processing it all, but this is just one of many. Edit. Thanks for the awards. And don't hesitate to call 911 if you truly think someone needs it, even if they don't want you to. Let us show up and we'll sort out the details. That is one of the craziest things I've heard. It's actually extremely common for older people to just deal with pain/inability to move despite being critically ill. I've had a few times where I told a patient, look, I'll be straight with you. If you don't let us take you to the hospital, you have a very real chance of dying. And they'll just respond with something like, oh, that's not good. But I don't wanna go, so if they don't wanna go, we can't make them. We usually just end up leaving the poor people there, grab lunch, and then talk about how stubborn they are over lunch. Sadly, not that uncommon for older people to fall and not get the help they need for a prolonged period. Have seen the end result in hospital a number of times. She had someone going to her, so confused as to why it took her neighbor 10 days to get her some help when she was in such a poor state. I work for a municipal water and sewer dept, and one day, while we were out in a neighborhood repairing a manhole in the road, we heard a faint "excuse me" coming from the house we were in front of. We look up, and it's an elderly woman at the front door of the home where she asks us for help, saying her husband had fallen. We enter the home, and she says he had missed the last step and or fell down the stairs and had been there for 3 days. We proceed to help her husband up to a seat, and he is complaining of leg pain and dizziness. So we call 911 and let them handle it from there. There were no phones in the house and neither owned a cell phone to call for help. It's one of those situations where that really makes me think about what might have been the outcome if we weren't there that day. Luckily, last I've heard, he was doing well. Unfortunately, my grandma was that type. She had a sore/infection on her toe and didn't know for a while because of neuropathy. Once she did realize something was wrong, she didn't say anything because she didn't want to be a burden. I think the family was going somewhere on vacation or some event. Well, fast forward a month. She was in the hospital because the infection spread. She died a couple weeks later after battling infections and then CDIF, which she contracted at the hospital. She had centenarian blood too, which was kind of a bummer. Unfortunately, my grandma was that type. She had a sore/infection on her toe and didn't know for a while because of neuropathy. Once she did realize something was wrong, she didn't say anything because she didn't want to be a burden. I think the family was going somewhere on vacation or some event. Well, fast forward a month. She was in the hospital because the infection spread. She died a couple weeks later after battling infections and then CDIF, which she contracted at the hospital. She had centenarian blood too, which was kind of a bummer. She was 88 or 89 I believe, and still sharp as a tack. Not quite the same but similar. Working a double-staffed ambulance backing up a rapid response car. Called to take patient with leg injury to hospital. As we arrived, I caught the distinct smell of death at the foot of her driveway. The solo paramedic came out of the house and was obviously trying her best to mouth breathe. She gave a handover that the patient had a leg injury over a month earlier. She was a hoarder and looked after her adult son who had significant learning difficulties, for whom she was the sole carer. The solo described the wound as worst she'd ever seen or smelt. So, following the pathway between flyers, pizza boxes, etc etc. The patient was sat on a chair in the lounge. To one side a pile that was once a sofa stood forlornly, but inaccessible from the litter-strewn pathway. The patient was in good spirits and didn't want to make a fuss. She had caught her leg on a trolley and she was diabetic. Living in the hellscape was prime breeding ground for anything but hope. The leg was necrotic from the shin down at least. Skin and other tissue hanging and dropping off freely. To my surprise, she wanted to walk out. Not that we had much choice given the environment. We got her onto the trolley eventually and organized social services to come care for her son. She was a lovely lady. Ex-nurse. She asked me if she'd be home later that day or not. I said it's unlikely, but see how it goes. The smell. I can still taste the air. As we drove away, I noted bits of her leg falling off onto the sheet as I tried not to chunder. Air con on. Extractor on. Mouth breathing. Chewing gum. Nothing was working. Even after we had discharged her and I had a Marlboro Red. Not for wanting to return to smoking, but to cleanse my airways. Yes, a Marlboro Red was more inviting even as an ex-smoker. The smell still hung in for a good day or two. Never found out what happened to her, but I've literally smelled dead bodies, days old, that haven't. There's the walls of porn, the sex toys, weapons etc in other homes, but that is just one of my crazy finds. Not quite the same but similar. Working a double-staffed ambulance backing up a rapid response car. Called to take patient with leg injury to hospital. As we arrived, I caught the distinct smell of death at the foot of her driveway. The solo paramedic came out of the house and was obviously trying her best to mouth breathe. She gave a handover that the patient had a leg injury over a month earlier. She was a hoarder and looked after her adult son who had significant learning difficulties, for whom she was the sole carer. The solo described the wound as worst she'd ever seen or smelt. So, we enter. Following the pathway between flyers, pizza boxes, etc etc. The patient was sat on a chair in the lounge. To one side a pile that was once a sofa stood forlornly, but inaccessible from the litter-strewn pathway. The patient was in good spirits and didn't want to make a fuss. She had caught her leg on a trolley and she was diabetic. Living in the hellscape was prime breeding ground for anything but hope. The leg was necrotic from the shin down at least. Skin and other tissue hanging and dropping off freely. Not that we had much choice given the environment. We got her onto the trolley eventually and organized social services to come care for her son. She was a lovely lady. Ex-nurse. She asked me if she'd be home later that day or not. I said it's unlikely, but see how it goes. The smell. I can still taste the air. As we drove away, I noted bits of her leg falling off onto the sheet as I tried not to chunder. Air con on. Extractor on. Mouth breathing. Chewing gum. Nothing was working. Even after we had discharged her and I had a Marlboro Red. Not for wanting to return to smoking, but to cleanse my airways. Yes, a Marlboro Red was more inviting even as an ex-smoker. The smell still hung in for a good day or two. Never Found out what happened to her, but I've literally smelled dead bodies, days old, that haven't come close to her in the 8 years since. Then, there's the walls of porn. The sex toys, weapons etc in other homes, but that is just one of my crazy finds. I have an older neighbor that lives alone, and I noticed last month that there were a couple of days of newspapers on the porch. That was very unusual, as if he goes away he'd stop it, and it was unlikely that he was anywhere, as he's a real homebody. Go to the ER or clinic, but he didn't want to be/see of the cost. I called the cops for a wellness check, and they had firemen come, and were able to get in the house but he wasn't there. Turns out he was in the hospital. He had a friend drive him there, to avoid the ambulance charges. When he got home he thanked me profusely for calling in that wellness check. Now he has also told me where the hidden key is, and gave me the code to his alarm system in case anything like that happens again. I also made sure that his sister who lives on the other side of the city has my number if she needs to get in touch with someone nearby. Thank you for noticing. My nana used to live in a court where a few elderly people lived, either in couples or single. My nana lived alone for a while after my granddad died and is now in a nursing home, and one of the younger ladies made sure to keep an eye on all the houses of the elderly, checking if lights were left on/off, mail piling up etc. And they would let her know if they would be away a few days, so she wouldn't worry. It was extremely sweet of her to keep an eye out, especially because before she came along my nana's neighbor had died and no one knew about it for 2 weeks. And that is enough internet for today. This story is so sad man. And that is enough internet for today. This story is so sad man. I hope you recovered well from witnessing this. Nice. Similar tale here. 72 years old male, brown recluse bite. Didn't want to call though his back hurt. Family came to see him. He said he was okay, but was trying not to cry. His family called. We arrived, pull him off his chair and a large piece of white tissue and fat and purulent MN. After seeped from an area starting at his mid-back to the back of his right knee. Minimal blood, just weeping. Lots of bone was visible, and the smell was invigorating in the worst of ways. Eyes and noses were running, and lots of coughing and gagging. Of course he was filthy in his nether regions as well. He died 2 days later. I can't see him being able to survive the infection regardless. I've seen something similar minus the rats, but add the fact that this guy had been wearing the same pair of socks so long his skin literally grew over the top of the socks. This is the worst thing I'll have ever read. I was at a house for a cable TV service call. Customer wasn't home. So I called him. He said, I will be home in 5 minutes. And don't freak out, but I have a tiger on the truck. When he got there, he had a tiger in a cage on the back of his truck. I got to pet the thing, feed it a little, and then went on to see his venomous snake collection, his hand grenade collection, and his hot sauce collection. The very next day, I was at another service call and asked the customer to get to the pole in the backyard. And he told me that he has a tiger in the backyard. So don't freak out. I got to pet the thing and feed it a little. I had been working cable for 18 years to that point and had never encountered a tiger in all that time. I have been working cable 7 years since and have had no further encounters with tigers in that time. But for 2 days consecutive, I visited homes with tigers. PS. South Carolina. Ex-Geek Squad. One house I went to was a retirement home. The guy had to be in his 80s, had used condoms everywhere, and women's underwear on the floor. Had the biggest porn collection I have ever seen. Floor to ceiling bookshelf 12 feet long of just porn. Used to set up one of those shitty 5.1 home theaters in a box things. After we were done and left he called and said there was an issue, so we begrudgingly went back. And it was just a ruse as he wanted to show us porn. I went into a house like this back when I was an EMT. The guy lived alone and was much younger than 80. One of the things that bothered me the most was just how sticky his floors were. I think I disinfected my boots 3 times before I felt comfortable wearing them again. Of course he wanted to show you porn common. He was mad you did not ask about it. That is as strange as it is hilarious. Just recently had a client who was fairly normal on the outside, clean cut, steady factory job. decent car, etc. Inside his house, the roof was rotted through. There were holes in the floor, dead rodents in the kitchen cupboards, etc. The weirdest thing was that he kept talking about his wife. But it was abundantly clear that no one lives there with him. This guy has a completely normal life on the outside, but is definitely off. Edit. 1. For those who asked, it's construction / contracting. Edit 2. For those who asked about the rodent situation. The guy had a lot of desiccants / dehumidifiers, so they weren't really decomposing but more like mummified witches. Why they didn't smell. Any chance the wife passed and he's just had an abysmal time letting go? Delivered pizza to a house where I was greeted by a man and what I thought was a large dog. Until it neighed at me and I realized it was one of those miniature horses. You delivered pizza to Lionel Sebastian. A woman who built an aluminum foil tent over her bed so they couldn't control her dreams or thoughts while she slept. I found out later that she'd been a member of the Branch Davidians. When I worked as a building inspector we saw a house that had not paid their water bills and had their service disconnected. So naturally their solution was to get a bunch of big blue storage bins from Walmart, cut a hole in one end of the lid, and shit in those. They had 5 lined up in the living room. There was also 4 dead dogs in a closet. I puked for the rest of the day. We condemned the house. Did you meet the people who lived there? I shadowed a home health therapist once. We went to a house where we had to tuck our pants legs into our socks because of fleas. We drove down this dirt road and I thought we were going past these abandoned single wide trailers. But then we parked in front of one. This trailer did not have steps to enter. You had to boost yourself up. The floor was rotten through to the ground in places. And there was a grown mother with 6 young kids in there, including the one we were seeing who had hydrocephalus. But the mother never got it treated and neglected the child nearly to the point of death till grandma found them and took the ARBBO. Grandma was really trying her best. But this place was the most unsafe place I had ever seen. Hopefully you never have to use this information, but if you are ever in a house with fleas everywhere when you leave, turn on your car and stick your pant legs / shoes under the exhaust. The carbon monoxide kills them instantly. My dad's business partner bought a home on our street after the lady who lived there passed. She did not have any living relatives. My dad was tasked with getting the place cleaned out and ready for contractors since we lived across the street. The woman who passed was always a nice lady and when I'd often go hang out with her on her porch, where she taught my sister and I to knit. We were never invited inside and never really asked to burrow. At my age I did not really think anything of it. In a hoe. My dad was really excited to show us the place, but kept a secret what was so about it. We walked in to find out she was a hoarder. The entire house was filled with 6 feet tall piles of junk, save for the walking paths through each room which were actually quite neat and the bathroom which only had a pile as tall as the toilet seat. What was strange is that it did not even smell much at all. I had seen hoarding TV shows, and they always noted the horrible stench. It definitely did not smell good, but all the junk was basically brand new things still wrapped up in their packaging or their store bags. It seemed she just had a shopping addiction, but was still a neat lady. Edit. It seems a lot of other users have similar stories, especially with older relatives. I wonder if it has some sort of biological instinct to gather random junk, like nesting, when you're older, a clean hoarder. That seems contradictory, but apparently they exist. My grandmother was similar in the last years of her life. She had a QVC addiction, shopping channel on TV for those that don't know. QVC is a predatory business, and she was the prey. She lived with my mom and I, and we had use of maybe 10% of the house. We are talking single paths through the house. Some rooms literally floor to ceiling, wall to wall packed. Garage was full with her car in the garage. And things packed in and on the car. I remember as a kid of 6 or 7 having a path to my bed and a small table in my room. If I wanted to use the table, I had to put my things on my bed. She also had 2 boyfriends that had a ton of her things in their houses too. It took years to sell, donate, clean up all of it. My mom refused to just throw it all away since it was brand new, and since my grandmother left her with quite a bit of credit card debt. My grandmother was similar in the last years of her life. She had a QVC addiction. Shopping channel on TV for those that don't know. QVC is a predatory business, and she was the prey. She lived with my mom and I. And we had use of maybe 10% of the house. We are talking single paths through the house. Some rooms literally floor to ceiling, wall to wall packed. Garage was full with her car in the garage. And things packed in and on the car. I remember as a kid of 6 or 7 having a path to my bed. And a small table in my room. If I wanted to use the table, I had to put my things on my bed. She also had 2 boyfriends that had a ton of her things in their houses too. It took years to sell, donate, clean up all of it. My mom refused to just throw it all away since it was brand new, and since my grandmother left her with quite a bit of credit card debt. My mom needed to sell things to try to pay it off. Vet tech here went to an at-home euthanasia. The people were very wealthy. They had huge abstract art painting in the living room, probably 12 feet by 4 feet. That said, I like putting my dick in anus is not too shocking. But just enough information where anyone in their living room might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Heh. We worked on this guy's house. He was in advertising. Beautiful trophy wife. When you walked in, you were greeted with a 5 feet, 3 feet. Zoomed in. Close up of said trophy wife's vagina. My eyes were deliberately going from picture to wife to picture. Electrician, did a call where the family had a full size 7-8 long, big, living in their house, just chilling in a room right off the living room. Another call where the older couple had very anatomically correct drawings of themselves on all of the walls. That was awkward. A friend of mine in middle school had a giant pig in their house. Apparently a family member was allergic to dogs and cats, so they got this little pot-bellied pig as a pet. They let it into the yard for the summer and the thing turned into what looked like a giant boar. Tusks and bristly hair and all. They still loved it very much, so in the cold winter months it got to live indoors. They had a grand piano and a swooping curved dark hardwood staircase and this giant pig in their home. When I worked as a housekeeper there was this one ebb we would clean, and in the office there was a giant bookshelf full of books. But upon further inspection we realized that they were literally all books about Hitler and the Nazis. Also not a house, but the mechanics of a car dealership we cleaned would routinely shit on the bathroom floor instead of the toilet. I had a girlfriend who worked at a putt-putt and go-kart place. She said every few days there would be shit on the walls. But to be fair, there are also historians that only do works about the Third Reich. Especially when it's in the office. I did home hospice nursing for a few months. Yeah, I'd be surprised how cluttered and dirty even homes in nice neighborhoods can be. I had one house I went to, the patient had vomited all over the carpet hours before. The family member said they didn't know it clean it up, yet because they were waiting for someone to bring them carpet cleaner, so they laid a towel over the vomit pile/chunks. Mind you, this carpet was matted and stained all over. It didn't know it needs specialty cleaner. They could have used any cleaning product they had on hand, and it would have been better than waiting hours. Bleh. Thousands of bed bugs crawling all over the walls. The resident and his motorized scooter. There's a reason some home health workers take an umbrella or large brimmed hat, think classical, sombrero, into the home until they can assess for such issues. For those curious, I believe the home was eventually demolished. I had a home inspector tell me something similar. He thought it had started to rain outside due to the drip drop noises. It was cockroaches falling off of the walls and ceiling. Working as locksmith. Get called to a key house. Talk to client before I show up. She seems like a completely normal lady. I show up. We talk for a moment outside. Completely normal house from all looks. She's an RN. Zero warning signs. She goes to open the door and let me in, and starts acting sheepish. She starts apologizing, and says something like, "Excuse the mess. The door can't open all the way. There's 3 to 4 feet of trash everywhere. Not hoarding boxes, or collecting weird stuff, but just garbage. Rotting stuff. But shit. Piles of it. There's a 9-inch wide walkway through the garbage that's 6-inch deep of compressed garbage. To-go boxes, fast food bags, magazines, you name it." She goes in, walks through to the living room, sits down on a couch that can't be seen. Garbage everywhere. A cat appears out of nowhere and sits on her lap lovingly. She seems for all practical purposes like a completely normal functioning adult. I looked it up, it's some weird form of the hoarding condition, but just rotting waste. She seemed so normal. I did the job and left. Felt bad for her. Still kinda freaks me out. Like there's no way you're guessing this nice nurse lady is actually a garbage troll. Man, that must have been really strange. Yep. I mean, I'd seen filth before in a few places. I'd seen a hoarder or two, but in all those situations the people were fairly obviously fucked up somehow. Addicts usually for filth and obviously not all there for the hoarders. This lady was just completely normal. She had nice hair and makeup, was in decent shape for probably mid-40s. She spoke and acted normal. She had a good solid job. Said she was an RN and I believed her. She had a nice house and car, oh yeah. Yep, I mean, I'd seen filth before in a few places. I'd seen a hoarder or two, but in all those situations the people were fairly obviously fucked up somehow. Addicts usually for filth and obviously not all there for the hoarders. This lady was just completely normal. She had nice hair and makeup, was in decent shape for probably mid-40s. She spoke and acted normal. She had a good solid job. Said she was an RN and I believed her. She had a nice house and car, oh yeah. Her car was nice and clean, which I found really weird. I used to install dish network for a living. I was installing for an elderly lady who complained that her sister's TV always showed the same thing hers did. I had a 2 TV installation order, so I figured that would be okay. I finished the installation and was demonstrating the system when she looked at the full length mirror and complained that her sister's TV was still showing the same thing. Noped out of there as quick as I could and left notes on the account in case she called in. Or man, she likely had dementia. You should have contacted someone. I worked tech support for a major telecom provider and a big part of my job was dispatching technicians for on-site issues. I've worked for enough telecom companies to know that they are all evil, profit-driven, borderline cartels without a shred of decency or compassion. But I was pleasantly surprised by one thing. Technicians had an absolute ability to just nope the fuck out of any call at their own discretion. If the customer made them uncomfortable, made them feel unsafe, interfered with the job, refused to take instruction, didn't clear the work area, conditions were unsafe, unsanitary, anything, the techs could walk off and the company wouldn't bat an eye. A note would be left on file for that residents and the customer would get one chance to rectify the issue. If it happened again, a denial of service would be issued for the address. In some very rare circumstances they were not given the second chance. The company even went so far as to instruct their techs that if they encounter an infestation they get right into their service vehicle, strip down, bag their gear, put on their spares and file a reimbursement claim for a full set of new gear toes to tits. Probably more of a liability thing than a corporate decency move. But I was surprised regardless. I worked cable for a company that had the bid, so the union world know it get too big. My trainer said, if you ever get to this part of town, leave your tool bag outside. Otherwise cockroaches would infest it. Only got to nope out of one job. Dispatch told me to do it, say it was inaccessible, and they would send it back. It was something like 7 PM at night, and had just got the job while I was traveling to the next site. Imma Nanny and I went to a new job one morning and the little girl showed me what she got for her birthday, and it was a windshield cover for a car. As a kid who also just only curdo random shit, this made me laugh. I once felt like the luckiest human alive because my parents bought me a $3 key holder bracelet, like the ones teachers have, a rubber coil with a metal look. Played with it for days, so I imagine this child was very similar. But if not, definitely have questions for the parents. Oh god, I have so many. The one that springs to mind first is the house where the firefighters already on scene pointed to the carpet and said, careful, there's poop on the floor, but I haven't seen evidence of pets. The whole place was bad. Then there was the old man whose only clean part of the house was a small portion of his bedware he slept. Everything else was covered with clutter and filth. I have no idea how food was made in his kitchen, or how he used his bathroom to either bathe or shit. The bathroom was similarly covered with junk and filth. There just wasn't a clean surface anywhere. Think about the ruins of buildings you see in post-apocalyptic video games like Fallout. Think about how dirty, stained and cluttered those bathrooms and kitchens are. Then, quadruple the amount of dirt and random junk in any given room, so it covers every flat surface. And you're getting pretty close to this guy's house. I took pictures and filed a report with Adult Protective Services. This guy couldn't care for himself. It was really sad. That's wild. I guess you must have some serious baggage to let things get that far. Yeah, I wonder. I don't know what happens that people get that far. Does he not want to? Does he just not even see the mess anymore? It's hard to say. I've never kept the tidiest home, but I can't imagine letting it get to the levels of filth I've seen. Honestly, though, I have had some friends whose homes I absolutely would not go barefoot in, or be very comfortable eating food from their kitchen. One girl I actually aborted a hookup cause her house, bathroom, and shower were filthy, and I wasn't sure the last time she showered. Oof. I think that might have been an embarrassing hookup for both parties. Where to start? During my plumbing apprenticeship I worked in North London for the local authority. Our job was to go into houses and update their boilers to new high efficiency boilers. One home was a top floor flat, and we were told in advance that the guy who lived there went by the nickname of Birdman. He was called this because he left his windows open year round, allowing all the pigeons to roost in his place. On approach via the stairway, you could smell the ammonia from the bird shit. By the time we got to the door we were gagging and called the job off. The local council had to call in deep cleaners in hazmat suits to clean the place before any work would go ahead. Another place a guy lived who I'm pretty sure had some mental health issues. When we got in he had broken computer parts covering every single square inch of the floor. He said that he wanted us to remove our boots to work there, but we flat out refused on health and safety grounds. Whilst we were there he spent most of his time on the phone calling local zoos asking what they did with their spare porcupines. He was calling because he wanted to eat them. When they refused he accused them of being racist as he claimed to be from Africa and it was a delicacy for him. He was a white guy with a North London accent, not saying he couldn't have been born in Africa and emigrated, but it sounded made up. Last was a very friendly family, but their place was a mess. When we got in they offered us tea which we politely declined. Fish on the floor. It was gross. The worst part was having to get in the bedrooms. One room, which was barely big enough for one adult, had 3 adult men staying in. It smelled of old mildew and sweat. When one of the guys got up out of bed to give us the room, his toenails were so long that they made a tapping noise on the laminate flooring. Kind of like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park. I'm not sharing this to make fun of any of these people. They were clearly living close to or on the poverty line. If anything I think these type of people need more help from society. Better mental health resources, more living space and just general wellness checks could all help these people. Final paragraph was very nice on your part. Fish on the floor. It was gross. The worst part was having to get in the bedrooms. One room, which was barely big enough for one adult, had 3 adult men staying in. It smelled of old mildew and sweat. When one of the guys got up out of bed to give us the room, his toenails were so long that they made a tapping noise on the laminate flooring, kind of like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park. I'm not sharing this to make fun of any of these people. They were clearly living close to or on the poverty line. If anything I think these type of people need more help from society. Better mental health resources, more living space and just general wellness checks could all help these people. Final paragraph was very nice on your part. At least 30 bicycles in the living room and a wall of car radios in his bedroom. I quickly figured out what my client did for a living. Not weird but really sad. Had to go check an apartment because when I'd had a tip that there could be moisture damage. The apartment belonged to a retired older man and apparently when he had a nurse visit him at home, they had made the report to building maintenance. When we got to the bathroom, me and my partner saw something that haunts me to this day. The ceiling was black. The walls were black. Everything was covered in a solid black wall of mold. The man living there had no sense of what it was or what it meant. That mold had to have been growing for quite a while. And I have no idea how long he had lived there breathing it in, without no one even coming to visit to see and report it. I have no idea what happened to the apartment or the resident, but I am sure the bathroom had to be fully made anew, and I am hoping the man is living somewhere safer. I'm worried about my lungs just reading this, not mine story, but my wife. She was what amounts to a very well-degreed social worker. Her job was to do in-home assessments on people with mental health issues. She has lots of stories of filthy homes, but she had one client that she visited, and the house was absolutely disgusting. Spoiled food and garbage everywhere. Unimaginable smells. Clearly the client did not clean. My wife noticed they had small, open sores all over her ankles and wrists. She was super concerned of picking up bed bugs at this time as one of her coworkers had that happen. She noticed a tiny bug crawling on her slacks. Tried to brush it off and immediately completed the assessment. She ran to her car, took off her pants and shoes in the parking lot, tossed them into the trunk, and got into the driver's seat and called me. We left her car outside in sub-freezing temps for the next few days. Afterward, she found out it was not bed bugs, but fleas. The place was infested with fleas. My wife talks about doing the cockroach shuffle when leaving some houses. When I worked in pest control, I went to a house that called us for roach problems. Shocking. As soon as I entered the home, I knew it was going to be bad. The smell nearly knocked me down. I had to make an excuse to go back to the truck right away, just to take a breath. I returned with my mask on. Inside the house was the mother and 3 small children. The smell was something that I really hadn't smelled before. And in this business, you smell a lot. The house was dirty, but not in the hoarding way. At first glance, just basically a typical house that was obviously run by the kids and lazy parents. Kitchen was dirty, looked like about a week of dishes piled up, and scraps of food on the counters. But still nothing explained the smell. As I started up to the attic, the little girl ran by my latter started to pull down her pants as she ran to her room. I looked away, but she left her door open. As I climbed into the attic I noticed that she was squatting and taking a crap in the middle of her room. After she left I looked in her room and saw piles of human feces all around her room. Dried up. I checked the other kids' bedrooms and found the same thing. The mom didn't even bother to clean up. Knowing that she had an appointment with me, I made some excuse to schedule another follow-up later. I left before I even left the driveway. I called Child Protection Service. OMG, that is insane. Innocent children to such a filthily first oil vertical bar. I wouldn't say weirdest, but the laziest and most disgusting thing I ever had to deal with was when I worked for the housing community. We were installing all new boilers for all the houses. Every set of rows had a dumpster. Well, every resident was given a month notice that we would be entering the houses and would need access to the closets to drill holes for the pipes. We go into a woman's apartment, it's a girl I went to school with, and she tells us we can't come, and so we had to get the property manager, and when we enter we get blasted with this horrible odor. Then we get to the closet and they are 6 feet wide, 10 high, and it is floor to ceiling garbage, bags and dirty diapers. We had to call off the job till the place was cleaned. This girl was paying $30 a month for everything and couldn't even walk 30 yards to the dumpster with her trash so nasty, so lazy. Edit. Mental illness is one thing, but willingly having 3 babies to multiple guys and living off child support and gov assistance claiming you live that way because you want to see your babies grow up is a choice. These women aren't heroes or brave, strong, independent women who don't need a man. There are plenty of single moms that hold a job while going to college and still get to see their babies grow up. When my dad bought his first duplex, I was involuntarily employed to help him restore the property to a livable state. We filled up 2 20-yard dumpsters which were filled past the brim and still had to put garbage in the cans out for a few weeks. The previous tenants of both units wouldn't take their garbage to the street. Instead they would load the garbage bags, not everything was bagged, into the garage, behind the house, and in the side yards. On the plus side, I found my first porn magazine collection there in pretty good condition, as well as a crossbow. Damn. That sounds exactly like the first house my parents rented. The rental agent stopped at the front door and took a deep breath and asked, how good is your imagination? The house was covered in a foot of trash. The basement was completely filled with trash to the point where you couldn't even go down, and the garage had a 10-foot pile of garbage in it. The weirdest part was that the master bedroom had 6 inches of stockings on the floor, almost as though the tenant would use one pair, throw them on the floor at the end of the day, and then use a brand new pair. They ended up going with that place because the owners promised a full scrub of the place. New carpets everywhere, new paint and a deep clean of all the bathrooms. Front yard. The city wasn't able to remove it until the spring. Oh wow. Former EMT here checking in. I'm gonna have to go with a man who collected/hoarded LED lights and toys. Might not sound all that interesting, but imagine walking into a house full of boxes and boxes of LED light pens, light up fidget balls, light up cat toys. Yadig. I'm talking an Edison wet dream. He also slept on an inversion table. Didn't have a fridge, no TV, no radio. Won thousands of books and magazines and a hot plate with rows and rows of canned food. I miss him sometimes. I delivered pizza at a drug dealer's place. Building was locked down with kids monitoring the entrance. They told which floor to go and which door to knock on, then followed upstairs. The guy that answered the door looked basically Mickey Rourke in Iron Man 2. Another guy was playing FIFA with a gun casually left on the couch next to him. Mickey paid me. The kids escorted me downstairs and gave me a bag of weed as a tip. I did residential HVAC for a few years. I've seen a few hoarder houses. The worst was an older lady who had most rooms full of what seemed like garbage. At the end of the day I was working on the thermostat, placed my screwdriver on a random pile because I needed both my hands for a second. Went to pick up my screwdriver and finish up. Right next to it was a bowl of used sanitary napkins. After, when I was leaving, the lady reminded me to vacuum. Wouldn't have bothered me if I had actually made a mess, but I know I did not. I know this because I put down a drop cloth to avoid placing my tools in cat vomit and anything else that was on her disgusting floor. Had a client who had 2 full closets of clothes, but said they had nothing to wear. I cleaned, organized their clothing in each closet, providing them with many outfits to choose from. They also had 3 drawers full of socks. Hundreds, many of which were one of a kind in a different drawer. Took me hours to sort and match and get rid of the ones that had no match. I was a CNA there to provide heath services, but many people needed a lot more than that. One lady had 3 closets. Many clothes no longer fit her. Worked every time I was there to try to organize her things, provide her some outfits put together for her to choose from. Also, could never get used to finding wads of money stuck everywhere. One lady had me looking for her social security card, which she thought someone from our agency had stolen. I found it in her safe, stuck in her deceased husband's wallet. While looking, I noticed a large amount of money there. She was wanting me to take her to the bank to get money. I advised her she had cash in her safe. She asked how much. I told her I did not touch it, but went back and counted a few $100s and gave her her social security card. She was one of the meanest people I ever met. We called ourselves the Usuviforso, as she fired people all the time. She lived to 103s when a great grandmother of mine died. They found stashes of money throughout the house, cashed and the money placed back in the envelope and hidden. She was mean as hell, too. Very controlling and antisocial. She never threw any food out, either. She cooked it and ate it, no matter how bad it had gone. It sounds like she was crazy, but she had fled Poland as a child during WWI. Walking with her family through to England, immigrated dirt poor through Canada, then to the US where she survived the depression and WWI, supporting herself and 2 kids. All those experiences made her distrustful of governments, banks and other people. She wanted to make sure she had cash if everything crashed, and was afraid of ever going hungry again. All of those experiences made her into that person. It always make me wonder what are the backstories are to some of these people. I was a paramedic and then later a police officer for many years. I've seen enough hoarder situations to last me 10 lifetimes. Probably the most odd thing I've ever seen was in the home of a sweet old elderly couple. Their home alarm went off in the middle of the night due to a malfunction of some sort. This is a very common call. My partner and I showed up, and the couple was very nervous that someone had broken in. So they asked us to do a check of the inside of the home, which we agreed to. The house was pretty big, including a very large finished basement with lots of rooms in a crazy array. It actually reminded me of Buffalo Bill's basement from Silence of the Lambs, but cleaner. We opened one door and found a square room, about 12 x 12 feet. Walls alternating paint blue and red. But the odd bit was the room had nothing in it but a single chair directly in the center, and eye bolts in the concrete floor, one on each corner of the chair. The chair was one of those old school chairs you'd find in a 1960s office or waiting room. It clearly looked like this room was designed for some odd sexual fetish or interrogating Al Qaeda. I remember when I saw it, I stopped dead and stared. It was so creepy. I felt like I walked into the set of a Kubrick film. My first thought was I'd turn around and find the old homie Arwana with an axe, ready to take my head off. My partner, who was directly behind me, looked in and said, "Well, we just found the discipline chamber." Fortunately he didn't grab my shoulder first, or I might have shot him. I'd have worried there were people captive somewhere in that home. Once upon a time, I worked in law enforcement. Did it for about 10 years. Spent about a year or so in criminal investigations, working our special VTMO type of cases, sexual assaults, molestations, child and elder abuse, neglect, domestic violence, internet crimes against children, working with the state task force, and missing/endangered persons. One day, me and my partner were working on a case of mine about possible child abuse reported by a school. I don't remember the specifics, but I believe it ended up being unfounded. Kid was upset that his box was locked away after doing something, and told the school counselor he was being beaten. I spent a month doing random checkups at the school and at home. Never found anything out of the ordinary. Anyway, one Saturday, the first time me and my partner stopped by to meet with the family, we got a surprise. The place I worked during this time was pretty rural, fairly low income. In BFE in the southern US, we are sitting at the table. Kids are playing Xbox again. Grounding was over, so he got it back, chit-chatting. I am facing the living room and my partner sort of has her back to it. Suddenly I see a brown and black furry creature about the size of a cat go galloping past a vertical bar, but it was not a cat. That I was sure of. My partner notices that I seem bewildered and asks if I am okay. Oh vertical bar, vertical bar, vertical bar, vertical bar. I think I just saw a damned Monco vertical bar. Fat as just Jerry. The mom says, and gets up to go collect Jerry. Sure, as shit. Thea've got a fucking monkey, complete with jungle gym and a hammock thing hanging in the corner to sleep in. I got to hold Jerry. Well, he kind of hung onto my arm for a minute or two like it was a tree branch. Apparently they shit wherever they feel like and can be a bit bitty. The mom said Thea more trouble than Thea worth. I asked my supervisor later on if I should look into how they got it or consult with a friend of mine who worked for the Staten Island Wildlife and Natural Resources Enforcement, but was told not to push the issue unless we needed to down the road. So me and Jerry got to be brothers for a few weeks whenever I stopped by, and by brothers I mean he was a huge asshole. My wife used to do in-home pediatric nursing. One of the homes she was assigned had the children's bedroom in the basement, where she had to walk across soggy, dirty clothes through a poorly lit hallway to get to it. There was often dog fesses/urine puddles. She moped out and reported the house after 2 weeks. She would hope the mess was a temporary thing, but the parents showed no intention to clean it up. My husband's experience relayed to me. He was renting a small 2-bedroom apartment with his now ex-wife. Her sister came to stay with them for a while, trying to get on her feet and get into school, work, etc. After a heavy storm, the landlord came to check on the apartment and went into the basement. It was completely flooded with several feet of water. He said there was no way the storm did that, and found that there was a burst pipe as well coming from the bathroom. Turns out the sister was flushing those wet wipes down the toilet and it finally overloaded. It They found her closet full with wet wipes. Used, hundreds. She never showered apparently, just wiped down with wipes. Piled them in the closet, or tried to flush them. I worked for a moving company and we went into a Redditors house, and kept finding needles everywhere. Behind the furniture, down in the couch and chair cushions. We stopped after a couple minimum, and refused to finish the job. Turns out her teenage daughter was diabetic, and would just toss the finger prick needles. And syringes everywhere. She honestly did not understand why we refused to touch the furniture after one of the guys carried some cushions and wound up with a needle stuck in his shirt. God have a few one. Went to visit a house. 55 years old ex-army man who refused to wash. Bathroom installed in county cottage, but yeah man still shit and pissed in a bucket and threw it out the window. Wiped his ass with his hand. Cobweb so thick there was dead birds and mice in it. Kitchen rampant with rats. He saw no problem with this. 2. House had rubbish up to about 6 feet in each room. Kitchen/sitting room had no flooring. Puke filled sink with whatever shite all over the counters. Blood sprayed on windows. No food, no cutlery. There was 5 kids living in this. 3. Older man never cleared his house, just accumulates more crap. A musician. Refused to put anything on his bottom half, just sat there with his tiny dick saying back quote to me. And ignored repeated requests to dress. House raided after he was taken away in an ambulance. Hordes of child porn upstairs. Horrific prick. This man was a local celebrity. 4. Alcoholic man who was having a few days of fun celebrations with friends. I turn up to do dressings and open his bandages to find maggots city alive and well eating his skin clean. Disgusting. But they did a great job of cleaning the wounds. 5. Do not underestimate how dirty and odd people live. Worked pest control in the 80s. We were sent to some rentals one day. Basically single story 1 or 2 bedroom duplexes. One lady had 3 large Great Danes that she did not clean up after. Piles of crap every few feet throughout the house. This job was in the southeast US during the summer and required work on both the inside and outside of the house, and being the new guy, I always got stuck doing the outside. Took one step inside, smelled the stench, did an about face, and was happy to be on outside duty. I do home and business at support, so I go into people's bedrooms a lot. I see a lot of weird/gross shit. 1. A horrific cockroach infestation. These fuckers practically were covering the floor. The customer said he may deal with them soon, since he wants a girlfriend. I refused service and left. 2. A home that was literally a shrine to Donald Trump. It was an older couple's house that, with the exception of a little corner with family photos, every wall was covered in Trump pictures and memorabilia. They had signed pictures, self-printed Trump University diplomas, commemorative coins, the framed .45 caliber pistol that was gold plated and had Trump's face on the grip, just everything. It was like walking into a North Korean home with the cult of personality shit. Hey, I posted this before somewhere, but it fits. I used to work as tidy up man / German speaker. Sorry for strange words sometimes / and saw a lot of really strange things in houses, which had to be normal for the people. Maybe the behavior is considered as illness, but it's really strange anyways. So the people were already dead when we cleaned the houses. I was younger back then, and I forgot to make pictures. It was 10 years ago. The newspaper couple, an old couple, lived in a small flat, and the only thing they did was to sort and organize the free newspapers you find in front of your door. But they had a special way to do it. They cutted every headline, every picture out of a bunch of these newspapers, and put them into ring folders. They did for over 40 years. We found papers from the 70s. Every wall in the flat were ring folders. But because on some point they didn't manage to do it right, they started to put the newspapers they still have to do on the floor. The floor in the entire flat was full of newspapers up to 50 centimeters. In their basement we found a small box of plastic filled with stones, sand and water. It was labeled, scoured, and packed 1968. In German this hits the humor my college, and I had, and we still giggle about that abject, ungepackt. The bottle lady. She was an retired gynecologist and lived in her old doctor's office. The interior was from the 70s and there was everything like in a normal doctor's office. But she lived in this thing with no bed, no kitchen. There. In the laboratories was a fridge, for medicines, she also used for food now. She was an alcoholic and drank gin only and brought the same small bottle from a small supermarket. But she didn't throw the empty bottles away. She placed them all over the doctor's office, her home, everywhere, gin bottles on every surface. Mountains of gin bottles. She only had a small path from the door to the couch, to the TV, to the toilet and the fridge. Social worker. A split personality schizophrenic autist with OCD. He loved many things and each thing has a separate part of the house dedicated to this single thing. A Mercedes wall with hundreds of Mercedes models and merch. His mother's hand-painted plates. 50 odd pieces. Romanian traditional leather dancing belts. 75 odd pieces. 70s gay pornography of husky men. An entire wall plastered with cutouts and a decent collection of homoerotic retro sex toys on display. He was straight though, no homo. An impressive collection of Bibles signed by hundreds of priests, bishops and even royalty. He loved herb jars too, had hundreds. All neatly sorted. An entire section of his apartment dedicated to various ceramic cooking ware. Crockpots and the like. Apparently German crockpots are the best. Who'd had thunk? Imagine. This and more. All in perfectly ordered sections in a house. Like a museum. And God help the fool who would touch or even worse, move anything. I bumped a model car and his caretakers told me it took him 3 weeks to fix it and forgive me. I'm still not allowed near the Mercedes wall. Good man though. Many funny stories. Smoked like a Chinese industrial park too. Installed tech for AT&T here. Aside from nasty hoarder houses, the weirdest was a kid about 3 years old went into his mom's bathroom, dug through the trash, and came out pretending her used tampon inserter was a slide whistle. I'm a social worker. I do home visits. Had to see a family I'd never met while covering for another social worker. I walk in, and the entire house looks like an African history museum. Masks, giant maps, weapons, and about 10 to 12 stuffed animals that the family told me they shot them themselves. Full body dead animals everywhere. You couldn't turn without seeing some type of artifact. Where to start? Painted for a living for a number of years in Minneapolis. Saw everything from hoarders worse than the TV show. Straight up chicken bones behind the TV, and everywhere else. Someone trying to stab someone else over $20. I narrowly missed getting poked myself. Banged a lady in an apartment building after drinking vodka with her while we were doing the hallways. Found dildos and coke in a dorm room after students moved out. Cockroaches. Bed bugs. Pretty happy I don't do that for a living anymore. This one lady that we called eyeballs had contact lenses over or were a vertical bar every other week. She just flicked them when she took him out. I think this counts. When I was a delivery driver in college, I delivered like 8 large pizzas to a sorority on campus. The girl who answered the door was completely naked, and the rest of her sorority sisters were standing way back, dying with laughter. She quickly grabbed the pizzas, said "Earth, this is your tipo," and shut the door. Cue rapturous laughter from inside. I did not mind one bit. An endless collection of dildos and sex toys of course. The worst thing was an elderly woman confined to her bed in a filthy house. There was trash everywhere. Roaches crawling around. Her bedding was filthy with excrement on it. I walked right out there. Told the guy who called me that I was running for parts. Called the police and never went back. Lots and lots of people don't have beds. Doesn't seem to matter if it's a $500K house or a $500 a month apt. There are a ton of people without a bed. I went to a house with a leak that seemed to be coming from a second floor bedroom. I was then warned by the homeowner that the bedroom belonged to their son who was currently locked up and that they had not gone into the room because their son threatened to kill them if they did. I opened the door just enough and took a peek inside, only to see a string tied to the other side of the door, and as my eyes follow the string I see that it leads to a shotgun. I disengaged the string from the door handle and went about doing my job. To this day I don't know why I decided to proceed through that door cautiously, but I'm glad I did. I am a realtor. Within the first month of getting my license, I showed a house that had stairs going to the basement made out of literal pieces of granite, countertops, and bathroom floor tile on the wall beside the stairs. Made for a very careful walk down those stairs. I have got 2 experiences while working as a cable TV install tech. 1. Installed at a home hosting a sex toy party, as in selling the toys. I saw a variety of toys I had no comprehension even existed along with fake dicks of every shape and size. 2. Showed up to a home to install internet 15 minutes after a dish guy showed up to install the TV. He tagged the door as nobody home, so I almost just left a tag of my own and split. Decide to take a quick peek through the window after knocking to make sure nobody was there and saw a woman about 60 years old passed out on the floor. Called 911 and they instructed me to try and get in while help was on the way. Found a window screen I could take off and slide the window open, and after getting in, there were open pill bottles all over with pills scattered everywhere and a few bottles of vodka empty or spilled. She tried to take her own life and I caught it soon enough for help to arrive and save her. Never got to install the internet, so I did not get paid for that job. I was doing work for an ISP in southern Indiana. My partner and I get to a mobile home that we had to drive through a field to get to. When they open the door we get hit in the face with the worst smell I've ever smelled, and I'm a nurse now. We go in and start doing the work as best we can, but it's so bad we can't take it and take turns going outside to breath while the other one stays inside to work. At one point their kid who looked to be 3 or 4 comes into the parents' bedroom where the computer we were working on was and flops on the bed. A coipal point mentions. Later mom comes in and says oh don't mind him. He just drank a bottle of Nyquil again. He'll be fine once he sleeps it off. Once finally got out of there we rolled the windows down until we got to a store where we went in and bought the biggest pill bottle they had and then went and bathed with it in the parking lot. It wasn't what I saw, it was what I didn't see. Way back in the day, I worked in legal aid. It was a noble calling, but it was tough and paid nothing. Sometimes, we had to go to the clients' homes if they were physically unable to come to see us. We were on like the 23rd floor of this dilapidated building in downtown Detroit, so it wasn't uncommon to trek out and meet a client. We got a call about a bankruptcy. We usually farmed those out if they were too complicated, but we still had to go. My intrepid paralegal and I trekked out to a house on the east side in one of those neighborhoods that had, for lack of a better phrase, seen better days. Nevertheless, most of the people on the block were trying mowed lawns, flowers, etc. One house was an absolute mess, lawn like the freaking Great Plains before the Dust Bowl. Several shitty cars tossed about, crumpled porch. My paralegal looks at me and says, that's gotta be them. And of course it was. The couple was nice enough to us after we crawled over the porch like we were crawling through the trenches in Normandy. Were there trenches there? I don't know. Both were in wheelchairs, raising the question of how the fuck they got out of the house, but I did not even think to ask because my mind was on something else. The smell. The smell of cat pee. Smell does not even begin to describe it. It was a funk of cat pee. It saturated every crevice of that house. Hung to our clothes, draped over my coat. And I could tell he was trying so hard to be pleasant. I was too, but OMFG that smell. It was the stench of 1,000 cats from ancient Egypt to Garfield and back again. Somehow, we got the details of the job losses and the sadness and the disabilities and the horrid things that happened to them in their life. All the while, the smell we became the smell. We escaped eventually, fleeing to the car and bringing the smell with us. We did not speak of the smell because no words needed to be said. But halfway back to the office, paralegal says to me, did you see any cats? Huh? No. No, I did not. We brainstorm, maybe they were in a back room. But no meows, no litter boxes. No cats. I have no idea where the cats were, if they ever existed, or if they were invisible, but that smell was on my clothes so bad that I had to dry clean them. Trust me, I was not wearing dry clean only clothes on $30k a year. I swear the smell lingered in my car, but I don't know if that is true. I just know that I never saw any fucking cats in that house.